I'm Brigadier Narendra Bahri. I was commissioned into the Brigade of Guards, that is my regiment. And after serving for 33 years and having participated in 1962, 65, 71, IPK of Sri Lanka, 3 years, Nagaland, a year at Gaza as UN peacekeeping, also something I feel happy about. My last 3 years, I was heading the Black Cat Commandos, the counter-terrorist organization. Very proud of the fact that I served in an outstanding regiment. What I didn't mention was that I was also selected to go to France for training in anti-tank guided missiles. We learnt well and we put it to very good use in 1971 war. I think the army is a wonderful career and more young men should opt for it. Army, Navy, Air Force. It's a wonderful career, very satisfying. There are many challenges which young men who have a sense of adventure and you handle men which are the finest the world can give you, finest soldiers that you can ever have. Now coming to my recollections of Gaza, which was 1965 primarily. It was in March 1964 that a letter from Army headquarters reached my battalion 4 Guard, 1st Rajput, then located at Hashimara in West Bengal. This letter nominated the unit for 1 year's tenure with the United Nations Emergency Force at Gaza. Now, in its 200 years history, this unit had already served overseas in Afghanistan a number of times, China, Egypt, Iraq, Greece, a number of tenures in Burma. In fact, at the end of the Second World War, this unit had also accepted the Japanese surrender in the Andaman Islands. So it was with abundant confidence that all ranks looked forward to this new overseas assignment. The unit was moved to Pune for 6 months of preparations, which involved making up of our manpower, of officers and men as per authorization, scaling with clothing and equipment, and extensive documentation. My commandant, General S.P. Malhotra, insisted on the original officers of the unit being reverted from wherever they were on outside postings to make up our strength. The shortfall of rank and file, that is JCOs, NCOs and other ranks, this was made up by personnel, especially sportsmen, from within the Brigade of Guards, so that it remained a regimental matter. 9 Dogras, that is the unit serving in Gaza before us, they sent us very comprehensive guidelines which came in very handy to prepare us for the forthcoming assignment. I was the adjutant of the battalion from the first announcement, throughout our preparations, and throughout the 1 year that we were deployed in Gaza. We returned in November 65, and what I'm saying today is my recollections after a matter of 56 years. Our outward journey began in November 1964 An advance party consisting of some personnel for the UN force headquarters and for the Indian contingent left by air. The main body, consisting of a small contingent headquarters, the main force being the infantry battalion, a signal company, a supply company, and a detachment of military police. This sailed by sea from Bombay in middle of November by one of the Hajj ships named Muzaffari. The seas were calm, and after a 10-day holiday at sea, with a short break at Aden and traveling through the Red Sea, we reached Port Said. After an overnight journey by train through the Sinai Desert, we reached Deir el-Balah. This was the Indian Battalion headquarters location. A very well-prepared relief plan was set in motion, and within a matter of 10 to 12 hours, my unit had taken over operational responsibility as well as administrative responsibilities for 10 different posts from 9 Dogra. And 9 Dogra on their part, after an equally well executed relief and de-induction plan, boarded the same train on which we had come, and from Port Said the same ship to take them back to Bombay. A word about the background to the United Nations Emergency Force in Gaza. In 1955, the United States announced withdrawal of aid to Egypt for the construction of the Aswan Dam on the Nile River. This was a very major project on which depended the agriculture and other development of Egypt. As a counter, Nasser, the Egyptian president, he nationalized the Suez Canal Company. In a swift and coordinated military operation, the Israeli armed forces occupied the whole of Sinai Desert and the Gaza Strip, including the Suez Canal. The Anglo-French forces occupied Port Said. The United Nations intervened, and after hectic diplomatic activity, the invading forces were withdrawn. Whereas Israel refused to allow any UN presence on its territory, the Egyptian government was persuaded to allow a United Nations peacekeeping force on its territory from 1956 itself. This was to help maintain peace by separating the two forces. A 500-meter wide neutral zone was established. This was all along the armistice demarcation line of 1950. Hereafter I'll refer to as the ADL. This strip, the Gaza Strip, was part of erstwhile Palestine. In addition, the international border in the Sinai was also kept under observation by this UN force. Now, the role of the United Nations Emergency Force was to prevent any outbreak of violence by their presence. Let me elaborate a few things. Firstly, the UN Emergency Force was present by invitation of the Egyptian government on their territory only. Secondly, the UN Emergency Force personnel were not subject to Egyptian law, But we had to show full respect towards the Egyptian laws. And finally, the UN Emergency Force personnel only had small arms for their own protection and not for enforcing peace. We had shed all our heavy weapons like machine guns, mortars, and anti-tank guns in India prior to coming on this mission. A few words about our deployment. Please refer to the enlargement now projected on the screen. The various deployments are as marked. This is not to scale. Let me elaborate a little. In the extreme north was the Daner Battalion, which was a mixture of Danish and Norwegian officers and other ranks. They were deployed to cover the starting point of the ADL from the Mediterranean coast running southeast. Next was the Swedish battalion. Both these battalions had their headquarters along with the UN Emergency Force headquarters and the Indian contingent headquarters in Gaza town. Next came a prominent landmark, Wadi Gaza, running east to west. This wadi was a riverbed with no water but had steep sandy banks forming an obstacle. Next was a large sector manned by my battalion with its headquarters at Deir el-Balah. Further west was the Brazilian battalion with their headquarters at Rafah. All the logistic units provided by the Canadian and Indian contingents were also located at Rafah. Now from Rafah also started the international border running south. This was primarily the Sinai Desert border, international border. This was manned by the Yugoslavs and the Canadians. The Canadian unit, Princess Patricia's own regiment, had jeeps with balloon tires and coil spring suspension. I found these to be excellent vehicles for the desert terrain. El Arish on the map was a regular airport with scheduled flights from Cairo. Our signal company was also located at El Arish. Gaza too had an airport, but was only used by UN courier flights between Gaza and Beirut. A word or two about the conduct of operations. As far as the ADL was concerned, it was kept under visual observation by day and was physically patrolled by night. Keeping the sand dune terrain in mind, the observation posts were sited at the crest of every sand dune where the ADL crossed it. The ADL was a mere 1 foot ditch which needed daily clearance. A team of 4 UN personnel manned each post for 4 hours, 2 persons for 2 hours on duty and the other pair rested. The Swedish battalion reinforced their men with patrol dogs at night. I do not recall how and with what frequency the Sinai international border was kept under surveillance. Other than the patrol jeeps, aircraft were also employed for periodic observation flights. As already explained, small arms were for personal protection. Where persuasion failed, detention was attempted, failing which diplomatic activity, mostly with the local authorities, was resorted to. Very little interaction took place with the local Palestinian population who were living in refugee camps. UNRWA, which is the United Nations Refugee Welfare Organization, provided food, clothing, and some monetary relief to these refugees. Very little official contact was kept with the local Egyptian authorities. I will try and enumerate some of my prominent impressions and recollections. Firstly, particularly friendly relations existed between the Indian contingent and the Egyptian citizens, as this was the era of Nasser-Nehru friendship and the neutral nations bloc. We were greeted with warmth wherever we went, whether in Cairo or in Alexandria. Our troops had no difficulty in functioning within the United Nations Emergency Force in spite of differing nationalities and languages. Many bonds of long-term friendships were born, especially amongst the officers. Differences between a standing professional army like ours and citizen armies whose personnel were on short-term national service were clear and stark in terms of dress, drill, and in conduct of operations. While the countryside in Israel was lush green and productive, the Gaza Strip countryside had a look of neglect. To the discernible, a tragedy was in the making. The Palestinians were living in rudimentary refugee camps. They were not allowed to merge with the host country population. While their creature needs of food, clothing, and shelter were met by the UN, their idle minds only bred frustration. In my view, terrorism was in the making.